Okay, so third and final video of the night, just something else I thought I'd get off my mind. I've done the brief introduction, world, YouTube, hello, and also done some thoughts about the current Scottish referendum on independence, which has actually led me on to another thought in relation to referendum as well, which is in relation to the European Union. Now, I should actually probably set out my stall by saying I am a Tory. I know that probably is going to elicit death threats from mindless socialists, Occupy lot, jumpers, NHS specs, that kind of thing. But weirdly enough, I am a conservative. I am a small state liberal, fiscally conservative, an Adam Smith-esque conservative, you might say. But at the same time, I think the EU is a good idea. I know, mad, isn't it? But I just don't think that the current debate that we're having in the country, and particularly the current debate that we're having in the Conservative Party in relation to the European Union, is actually particularly helpful, particularly realistic, or particularly truthful. Now, as with any sort of situation, being contrarian to something is very easy. You can easily get a platform, you can go on to Newsnight or to Question Time or whatever it might be, and you can say things like, we can't do this because of the European Union, and everybody claps. But the problem becomes when you actually have to look at the evidence for it, and you actually have to look at the situation on the ground. Louise Mensch, who is one of the sort of more recent Conservative MPs, MP for Corby, I think, that might be wrong, was on Question Time a couple of months ago debating with Laurie Penny, who is a left-wing broadcaster, blogger, etc. And she made a very interesting point, which actually I think carries over to this. They were talking about feminism and whether or not there had been the emergence of what she referred to as a kind of conservative right-wing feminism to counter the sort of socialist feminism of Laurie Penny and the others. And Louise Mensch made this very interesting point when she says, she was talking to Jeremy Paxman, and she said, remember, Jeremy, at the heart of every good conservative is a pragmatist. We're not like the left. We're not ideologues who believe so strongly in a particular ideology that we will pursue it even in the face of evidence to the contrary. Conservatives are pragmatists, we're realists, we look at the situation and we're prepared to do things. It also actually means that we're more likely to take tough decisions as well, because we're not bound by ideology that say, oh, well, we must do this because we've always done this. No, if it's not working, don't do it. There are so many examples of current policy where actually Conservative Party has had to take tough decisions, and frankly, I would say take decisions that Labour shirked, because Labour, just as a party, I just don't think generally is brave enough to make those decisions. But anyway, back to the European Union. Heart of a good Conservative is a pragmatist, and a pragmatist would say that the European Union is broken, rubbish, stupid, but it's all we've got. And I would actually liken the debate to a little bit to the debate that we had in the United Kingdom maybe about a year or two ago with the AV referendum. We all agree, irrespective of where you are in the political debate, unless you're on the absolute extremes, the sort of anarcho-communists or anarcho-fascists who believe in the complete destruction of the state, followed by some kind of potato union or parsnip union or whatever you want to call it, big farmers market, parsnip. We all believe in democracy. We all believe in parliamentary democracy. The question as to what that looks like is an ongoing question, but nobody in the UK is seriously considering that we just destroy Parliament and get rid of it. Although there was that guy with that mask. But apart from him, love Guido, but apart from him, we all accept that democracy is here to stay in a form somewhat like what we have now. And I think the EU is very similar to that. We've kind of got a bit of a misnomer at the moment that somehow we could pull out, that somehow we could withdraw from the European Union and, the bulldog spirit would take over and blah, 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 blah. This is balls. And this is balls for a very simple reason. If we were to withdraw, we would then be attempting to negotiate a fair trade or a free trade, either's not great, arrangement with a bloc of 27 to become 28, and if you at some point include Serbia and the other Baltic countries, maybe even up to 30 nation trading bloc. And in that situation, it is they who would dictate the terms of the free trade agreement, not us. And if you want a good example of what it is like to trade with the European Union, but not be a member of the European Union, look at the example of Norway and look at the example of Switzerland. Switzerland is not a member of the EU. It's not a member of NATO. In fact, the Swiss have never been much a member of anything. A joke now for anybody who's Swiss watching this, I do apologise. A joke of my own invention. Why do the Swiss sleep on circular beds? Because there's no possibility of taking sides. You know, as a nation, they've never got in the way of anything. They are bankers, they take money, they're quite happy to do business with anybody. They don't care, okay? But they're not a member of the EU, and yet, being landlocked and surrounded by European countries, they have to be on good terms with the EU in order to trade. This means that Switzerland has signed up to 75% of the directives relating to the single market. It's not a member of the European Union, but it still has to sign up and put those directives into law in order to trade. Same with Norway. The Norwegian Prime Minister in 2008, apparently in a slightly offhand remark, was quoted as saying that his country had become a fax democracy. What he meant by that was the fact that common market, or single market as it then became legislation, was decided upon in Brussels at the Council of Europe. It was then faxed to Oslo, or maybe Bergen, I'm not sure which is the administrative centre, I like Bergen, and it was then put into Norwegian law. They didn't get a vote on it. They had to be on good relations with the EU. They had to maintain their free and fair trade links. Therefore, they signed up to single market legislation. Since the 1970s, Norway has signed up to over 3,000 separate pieces of EU law. And it's never had a vote on them because it's not a member of the EU. In addition, it also pays something like 2/3 of the payments towards the Central European budget that it would do if it was a member of the EU. But, here's the key point, it's not in the EU, therefore it has never been able to negotiate a rebate or an opt-out or any kind of single market legislation. So the question I have for those who are, UKIPers, ardent anti-EU, forgive me, not anti-Europeans, there's a difference, anti-EU, very much in favour of the UK having a referendum. My question to you is simply this. In light of the fact that we would still have to sign up to the single market, in light of the fact that we would still have to sign up to pretty much every directive that came out of Brussels, and given the fact that we would have no vote, given the fact that we would still be paying into the common pot, given the fact that we wouldn't have a rebate anymore because we would have left, are you seriously suggesting this is in the British national interest? Because that's my question to you. A Conservative is a pragmatist. We do things for the national interest. We do them on the basis of reality, not on the basis of some glorious past or glorious future or glorious present that doesn't actually exist. We are pragmatists, and a pragmatist would look at the EU and say it's a botch job, it's not great, but actually we've got to be on good terms with it, and perhaps if we actually spent less of our time complaining about it and a bit more of our time actually getting involved and knuckling down, perhaps we could actually make something of it. Now, just so that everybody is aware, I am not a federalist. I am not suggesting we join the euro. It has been an absolute disaster in exactly the way that John Major, one of our probably most underrated prime ministers, although I'm glad to see recently there's been quite a lot of articles written saying how, thank God for John Major keeping us out of the euro. Everything that we said at the time in 1992 was going to happen has happened. Greece has defaulted. We said that you couldn't have a common currency without common fiscal policy. We said that the southern European countries could not possibly compete with a resurgent Germany. We said that they would end up racking up huge debts, be reduced into poverty, and end up crashing out of it in the end. This is all probably going to happen. But that doesn't mean that the EU itself is not a good idea. It is. It has problems. It needs serious structural reform. But the idea that we could just pull out without doing serious damage to the British economy, serious damage to the 3 million people whose jobs are entirely dependent on the European Union, and serious damage to our position to negotiate trade deals with larger voting blocs and larger countries such as India, China, etc., is just farcical. I mean, take the current negotiations that are going on in relation to South Korea. We have just secured a fantastic free trade deal with South Korea. We wouldn't have got that without the EU. In addition, the ongoing negotiations in relation to Japan and India and China, we would not get that if we were not part of such a large voting bloc. So yes, there are problems. Yes, we don't need Brussels sticking their nose into everything. Yes, Michel Barnier is a bit of an idiot. And yes, this bi-European act that Sarkozy's coming up with as part of his campaign is just a joke. But don't worry, we don't even have to veto it because the Germans will shoot it down. But seriously, if you think that pulling out of the EU is a good deal for Britain, you are totally and utterly barking. I'm sorry, you just are. If you could present me with any evidence to the contrary, I would love it. But if it's just hyperbole and jingoism, then frankly, we don't have time for that. And we are conservatives, we are pragmatists, we deal with the world, not with ideals. Thank you.